Hi, my name is Moamen Elmassry. I'm a PhD candidate at Texas Tech University in the Department of Biological Sciences. Um, I'm finishing my PhD actually this semester and graduating. And I will tell you about something a little different than actually my research or my dissertation research, but something that has been really interesting that I worked on with the Remnant Trust, and it's titled as the relevance of old Arabic Islamic manuscripts in the 21st century and the evolution of their artworks. So I was very lucky to do this work with the Remnant Trust using the fascinating collection they had. And the first thing I will have to say that I will have to thank them, especially Alex and Mallory, for their help and patience during these times, especially when the COVID-19 hit this semester. And I have been the Remnant Trust Scholar for this year, and I will tell you about something that has been really interesting to me, because as you know, the Remnant Trust has a really great collection, very rare collection of ancient or old manuscripts and books. And I noticed that some of them were in Arabic, or actually three that I was interested in to see how they're relevant up to this day and how they are used in modern culture as well. And here I will summarize what I did with these manuscripts, as you will see, and hopefully you will enjoy it. So the first thing is the collection had three books in Arabic, and here they are, how they are titled, and you can see the first one is called Fath al-Samad, Sharh Zaid ibn Raslan, and the name of the author in blue, his name is Waddah, Muhammad bin Ziyad, and it was around 1769. And then the second one is Guide to Happiness, similarly Abu Abdullah, around 1750. And then the last one, it was more of a grammar or an Arabic Nahu book, or a compilation of books actually. And you can see here, and it was around 1672, 1673. And these how they actually look like. So some of them are in good shape except for the first one, which it's because it's could be the oldest here, or one of the oldest actually. And to start with, so I'm gonna start with first explaining, because I'm gonna use this since they're all written in the Middle East and they're in Arabic, and for the dating, besides the Gregorian calendar in the Middle East or in Islam, there's another calendar or lunar calendar that had started, and after what's called the Hijra, and for the abbreviation for this or this calendar will be Anno Hijri, the same thing with ED. And the Hijra refers to this journey that the Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad took from Mecca to Medina in 622. And although the difference here, as you can see, the Gregorian calendar begins with the birth of Christ, but or kind of birth of Christ, with the birth of Christ, and on the other hand, the Islamic calendar begins with this pivotal event. Okay, so you will see there's a little bit of time difference between them, or at least years difference, because the Islamic calendar started way later than the Gregorian, obviously. And to give you a fun fact, actually, for this is. This year obviously is 2020, and for the Islamic calendar it's 1441. And since it's based on the lunar cycle, so it's shorter. So if you think about it, and you can extrapolate, these two calendars will actually have the same year at some point in time in the future. And I did the calculation for this, and it seems to be it's going to happen in 18,150 years, on Sunday, February 16th of that year, which is 20,870, which will be the Islamic calendar year will finally match the Gregorian calendar year. So that's kind of interesting if humans still going to be existing or not. But anyway, so that's I'm going to get back to the main topic here, which is the first book, which is called Fath al-Samad Sharh ibn Ziyad, Sharh Zayd ibn Raslan. And so I was trying to do some research because for some of these books, I'm sorry, I will come back for a second. For these books, the titles, I noticed, or even the dates and some of the authors were not very clear. So what I was trying to do on my research here was trying to see, to find the authors of these books and the dates if possible, and the titles, obviously, or for these manuscripts or works. So for the first one, it is written by someone called, and you can see here the Arabic, it starts from the right to the left, and the name in blue, and then from the left to the right in English. And you can see here this author, his name is Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ziyad al-Wadahi al-Sharabi, and you can see here, and he died in 1135 AH after Hijrah, and then, or 1722. So he wrote the original book in, or we believe around 112 or 119 in a city called Zabad in Yemen. And you can actually, in this book, I found in one of the pages actually the section, because of the ancient, or not the ancient, or the old Arabic or Islamic authors were very, very interesting actually in that aspect, in which at the end of the book they would actually write when they finished the book and the exact time even of the day. So for example, they say here, or the person who actually not wrote this book but who made a copy of this book, this is the actual copy, you can see here, and he says, first his name is Ahmad ibn Abu Bakr, and he said he finished the writing of this book on Sunday afternoon, which is really cool. This is the Islamic calendar month, Sha'ban 1st, 1189, or October 1st, 1775. So the date actually was closer to the date that was originally thought to be for the book, but there was a bit of a difference here between the actual dates. So the title of this book, actually, I tried to find out. It seems the title was not exactly what it should have been. So the title for this book, it should be Fath al-Samad fi Sharh Alfaz al-Zubad, which is very close actually to the original name that thought it was for. And the reason for that is that I will explain. So first, this work is based on the explanation of Imam Shihab al-Din Ramali, or he's also known as Ibn Raslan. And it has this versified work in Shafi'i Islamic fiqh or jurisprudence. And this book actually, or fiqh in general in Islam, or specifically this book, try to deal with everything in life. So for example, this book had 81 chapters that deal with different aspects, from eating, drinking, or washing, praying, marriage, burial, or everything. So it deals with really all aspects of life for Muslims. And several scholars actually wrote explanation of this work, of this original work by Shihab al-Din Ramali. For example, you have here Fath al-Samad fi Sharh Alfaz al-Zubad, which is the one we have, and then the one on the left, for example, you can see here Fath al-Rahman fi Sharh al-Zubad ibn Raslan, which is the title, for example, one of the famous explanations, the one written, but this one, for example, is written in Egypt, while the one in our hand was in Yemen, although it was much older. So that was the research I worked on for the first book, or what we found, which is we identified the person who, or the original author of the book, and actually the person who copied the book, and as well as the original title of this manuscript. For the second one, it was very interesting because it, as I said, it's about nah, or grammar in English, and this work actually has, or this kind of big volume has 5 works on grammar, and you can see here the word in Arabic, nahu. And the first 2 were identified originally, but then the last 3 works included in these manuscripts were not identified. So I tried to figure out who wrote them and the name of these authors. And I did this mainly by doing different research or kind of comparison between how of the writing and other books that could be similar or in the same aspects. And I was actually successful identifying the names of these books and who wrote them. And actually, it was a bit easier than I thought, although it was a struggle at the beginning. But I was able to do that because the ending actually of each book, each author had this interesting, I wouldn't call it signature, but a way of ending the book with certain phrases or paragraphs that was unique to them. Although it's not always the case, but for these, some of them were, so it made it easier. So this manuscript or this book was very interesting because grammar in Arabic evolved through time and changed a lot actually, and that these 5 works actually show more or less this transition of or development in Nahu. And you can see that from actually that because these are from 3 different centuries. And the only issue here, we know who wrote these books, or original books at least, and when they died, as you can see here. But for the dating part, it was much harder. The only first one, Kitab Kafiya, was the only one that was actually dated, so we know it's around 1672, 1673 AD, and it was written by Jamal al-Din Abu Amr Uthman ibn al-Hajib, and who died in 1249. So you can see that this one was wrote after his death with 4 centuries. And then the second one by Burhanuddin Abu Fath al-Nasir al-Mutarzi, and he died in 1213, so the same century. And then the third one was written by Zainuddin Muhammad ibn Bir Ali ibn Iskandar al-Burqawi al-Rumi al-Hanafi, who died in 1573. And then the fourth one was written by the same person. So these 2 books is Izhar al-Asrar fil Nahu and Matn al-Awamil. These both manuscripts on grammar were written by the same author. And then the last one, Al-Awamil al-Mi'at, by Abdul Qahir Abdul Rahman al-Jurjani in 1078 when he died. So you can see how these included from how these works are included from 3 different authors across 3 different centuries. The last one that I want actually to focus on and take most of the time for this presentation on to explain and clarify is a book that was originally called Guide to Happiness. And the work description first for this, the description for this work. So this manuscript contains 2 works actually. The first one, which is called Dalail al-Khayrat for short, or the longer title for this is Dalail al-Khayrat wa Shawariq al-Anwar fi Dhikr al-Salah ala al-Nabi al-Mukhtar, which could be translated as not exactly as a guide to happiness, but waymarks of benefits and brilliant bursts of lights in the remembrance of blessings on the chosen prophet, which is Muhammad in this case. And it was actually written originally by Moroccan Sufi Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Sulaiman ibn Abu Bakr al-Jazuli Simlali, who died in 1465. And then the second part of this book actually is qasida, or a poem. It's called Qasidat al-Burda, or it could be translated as Poem of the Mantle or the Cloak poem by Imam al-Busayri, who died in 1295. So you can see also they're coming from 2 different centuries. And to to give you a little background of, I'm gonna start with the second part with Qasidat al-Burda, which is very interesting, and you will see why in a second. So who wrote Imam al-Busayri? He was in Egypt. Although he was actually born in a city called Beni Suef, you can see here to the southern of Cairo, the capital, and then he died in Alexandria. And because of his actually work and to see how famous he is until even this day, in 1858 there was a mosque built for him or named after him in Alexandria, and it's still existing actually. It's one of the big mosques over there in Alexandria. And even more recently in Beni Suef, there was a statue that was constructed or built for him in front of actually the train station. You don't see the train station here, but it's on the other side. And it was built actually last year because he was born in this city. And Qasidat al-Burda, what is unique about, so Qasidat al-Burda is a poem composed by Ka'b ibn Zuhair originally, or in which it was called al-Burda, and that was during actually the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and he recited a poem in front of the Prophet after embracing Islam, and then the Prophet was moved by what he heard, and then he gave him his mantle and he wrapped it around him. And that's why it was called Al-Burda. And so the original one is not as famous actually as the one that was composed by Imam al-Busayri, which he did later on. You can see here in the 13th century. Although he doesn't, so this is kind of the interesting fact here, or note is, the poem for Imam al-Busayri, which was way later than the actual original Burda, although he was not the person who was actually physically wrapped by the mantle, although he saw that in a dream, and that's why this became to be called al-Burda, and for some reason it became really popular everywhere, more than the original one. But this is kind of a brief history of why it was called al-Burda. And then I was really interested to see whether it's still commonly Googled today or not. And for that I use Google Trends, which can show whether your term or your words are used relatively to each other to some extent. And you can see here that I try to see whether it's searched for more in English or Arabic, because it's originally in Arabic, although even if it's translated in English, people still recite it in Arabic most of the time. And you can see here, so in blue line here, you can see almost how many times it got searched, and you can see the peaks over time, and still increasing since 2004 to 2020. So it is still being Googled by many people. And on the left, this is just the relative search hits. And you can see in the red line, that was kind of interesting. So it's actually Googled more in English than in Arabic. And then if you look for more in geography or by sub-region where it's searched for, and you can see here from the first one on the left, so in English, of course, will be in Northern America, and even in the Middle East, a lot of people will Google it in English. And then on the right side, you can see in Arabic, it's still Googled, although it's more in the Middle East. And also Northern America, because some people will do it in Arabic. And then if you look for the combined to see what percentage of the regions are trying to find this piece of work in Arabic or in English, you can see that the majority of the countries or the regions try to find it in English, which is very interesting. And then although you can see, for example, Libya, and Iraq, and Jordan or Lebanon here, seems there's more dominated by Arabic. And it's kind of interesting because even in Egypt or Saudi Arabia, which is Arabic-speaking countries, they still seems there's a good portion of people who would Google this in English. Uh, and I was trying to see if in the US whether there's any certain regions that try to find it. And it seems here there, yeah, you can see here, from example, from California here, for example, both in Arabic and English, um, they try to find this poem. And in Texas, actually, you can see there are some regions, and although it's mainly in English, obviously, uh, and then you can see there are two hot areas, which is that search for this, which is around Houston area, Houston, Austin area, and Dallas area, Dallas Fort Worth area as well. Um, And very interestingly, this poem is actually still recited until this day in many events or many religious feasts in Islam or by Muslims. And there is actually a group in Chicago in which, for example, here I found out that they actually still recited during the time or during every now and then, and especially, for example, because this poem is mainly a praise to the Prophet Muhammad and his attributes, so it's usually recited during his birthday. Uh, and I will try to play this video. Let's see if it works and how it's recited. So you can see this is in the, I think, in the mosque or in part of the mosque in one of the places in Chicago, or at least for this group. It's called Ta'lif Collective, and you can see here men and women, and then they are grouped, and they're singing the first chapter of this poem, and I will play it now. And you can actually see here also the drum, or it's called tabla in Arabic, and they actually also use it, and they use different kind of musical instruments as well sometimes. Uh, So the second part of this work that was there, that was called Dalail al-Khairat, which is also a praise or in remembrance of or expressing love and admiration to the Prophet, which is very common, was written by the Moroccan Sufi. So it's still in Northern Africa. If you remember the first one, Imam Busiri was in Egypt, and here in Morocco. And then this actually book is very interesting, and I will spend more time on it here. So although yes, it's on the praises of the Prophet and everything, Muhammad, and describes actually where even he was buried. And then, although it doesn't really talk much about description of these, or it talks a little bit, but for some reason, there's an illustration in the middle of this book after describing where he's buried. Although not in great detail, but what's interesting that this description actually visualize the image, since many people are not familiar with it. So yeah, however, this illustration seems to be constant in all Dalail al-Khairat book over the years, and even copies from the Middle East, or even if you go northern to Turkey and Iran and different regions or in India, it seems every region had a version, more or less, of this illustration that I will try to examine here and kind of convey its message. So first, what's in this illustration? As you can see here, first on this part, this is what's called a minbar of the Prophet, or a pulpit. And simply, the pulpit or the minbar is depicted by small quarters here, arranged in the form of 2 or 3, as you can see here, or 4 steps. And this illustration is commonly laid under an arched niche where a mosque lamp hangs at the center, as you can see here. And this is usually the place where the imam in mosques will go up actually to give his sermon. And in the mosque there are no chairs, so people sit on the floor, so you can kind of imagine sitting on the floor and then looking up to the imam on this minbar. And then the second part here, the one on the right, as you can see here, with this kind of very nice illustration, is what's called Mihrab, or Qibla niche. And Mihrab is a semicircular niche in which the wall of a mosque that indicates the Qibla, which is the direction to Mecca, or the direction of Kaaba in Mecca, which is Muslims consider as the holy place. And this is the direction where Muslims will face during praying their 5 times prayers. So this description of the first or half of the first half of the illustration, and then for the second half, something called Rawdah, in which you can see here there's this kind of lamp, and then on the right side, the first, you can see 3 kind of rectangles here. The first one is the burial chamber of or the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad, and then he was actually buried next to, or two of his close friends or Khalifa were buried next to him, which is the first one will be Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then the next one is Umar ibn Khattab. So they're all buried actually almost in the same place or spot, and you can see here, this is a description of the burial. So these two pages have been consistent or shown in many versions or many manuscripts of Dalail al-Khairat or Way Marks of Benefits. And so you can see this is the one we have in the manuscripts in the Remnant Trust. And we know it's possibly from Morocco, and this is from the calligraphy in the book and how it's formatted in general. And we think it's around the 18th century AD. And I did some investigation to have a collection of these books or these pages or illustrations in books, different books or editions of this. And it took me a while actually to achieve that, but I collected over 50 of these from different times, and I tried to set up a timeline to see how this illustration evolved through the years. So you can see here, for example, I will show a few examples here. You can see this is a bit similar to it, to the previous one in some ways, and it's also from Morocco and you can see how it's kind of similar in many ways, and even the color is actually consistent since they are from the same region, which will be different than others will you see there. And this was from around the 16th century, and then this is another one from the 17th century. And this is another one as well from the 17th century, and then another one, and this was in Turkey, and you can see it's very, very different in its construction. And this is more of a similar one, or actually it's one of the closest one to the one we have, and it's also from Morocco, and the illustrator is speculated to be that person, a Manufi. And then this is another one, Morocco as well. Here's another one. And another one. I'm trying to show you just many to get an idea how it's consistent. Or you can see here from one from Turkey is also a bit different, although it was also from the 18th century. And you can see this one from Morocco as well. And this one as well, and most of these copies are either in auctions in different places or different libraries that I try to access to find these collections, and some of them are actually in museums as well. And this one from Northern Africa, which is thought possibly to be also Morocco or Algeria in this case. And this one is from Algeria actually, and you can see it's very different in many ways, and even the colors, and there are some writings on it as usual. And you can see even if it's a bit different in shapes in many ways, but it has the same format. So you can see here the Minbar and then the Mihrab, although here it's more thinner, and you can see the 3 tomes here. And this one is almost from the 19th century, and you can see here how it looks. Although actually for these ones are usually not made to be really physically accurate to the actual thing, but is more as a symbolic to what it represents. So you can see this one, and then some of them are very, or you would call it even primitive or very, very rudimentary. And this is, for example, from Egypt, although others are very, very detailed and beautifully appealing. And this one, I would say this is one of the most beautiful ones, and well kept as well. And it was also from Morocco, and this is from early 19th century. And I'm focusing on the dates here, or the centuries, as because you will see here in a second. This is another one. This one as well. And this is quite similar to ours as well in head. So that's why we think The one we have is also from Morocco because of how it's very similar in shape and construction, and also the date, because it's the dates kind of confirm the era, the times when it came from. And the reason for that, let me continue in a few more. You can see here there are more colors here as well. And this one is thought to be from India, and you will see the similarity with other ones later on. And the reason for this that I'm going to explain is it seems in the 19th century there was a shift in the illustration of what's included in Dalai al-Khairat. So around the end of the 18th century or 19th century, the illustration witnessed this kind of remarkable shift in which there's something extra that was included. So a depiction of the Masjid al-Haram, or and you can see here in the center of Kaaba, this is all people around it, and you can see it's the center because the Muslim pray towards it, so you can see it all forms these circles around it. So these are all people. Usually in this place you will get millions of people, really, because it's really huge. It has been expanding over the years in Saudi Arabia. They have been expanding the place to accommodate as many people as they can. And the depiction of this Masjid Haram seems to be appearing, it started to appear during that time on the right-hand side. Although while the images of the previous illustrations, the Rawdah and Mihrab, was still there on the left, although sometimes it was either mixed or either eliminated instead to keep the Kaaba as well. And although this really, the Kaaba, the place in Mecca, it doesn't have relation to what's mentioned in the book at all, because you remember the Al-Kharat is focused on the praise of the Prophet and where he was buried, which is actually in a different city, which is called the Medina. But it seems to be started to be included since Mecca is considered as the first sacred place and Medina is the second. So probably because of significance, it started to appear. And it seems there are a few. This is a topic of research, and I found two authors that actually try to convey a similar message as well. Why of this transition? And you can see here, for example, this is from the 18th century, as we mentioned. But then this, in this version of the Dalai al-Khairat by Muhammad Rajai, and in Turkey, so this is from the 18th century, or the end of the 19th century, and you can see while this part is similar to what we have seen before, it was also accompanied by this version which shows Mecca, and this is actually an overview of Medina as well. So so it's like there are kind of two faces of the coin. And to show you more in detail, so you can see in the center, this is first the image of Mecca, and then in the center or the focal point is the Kaaba, as this black cubic cube with something that's called Hajar al-Aswad, or the black stone on its left corner, as you can see here, because this is something part of its building. And then adjacent to the right side, but not connected to it, the Kaaba wall is the crescent-shaped structure known as the Hijr Ismail. This is part of the sacred kind of items there as well in the same place. And then the Kaaba is also surrounded by different highlight of the Masjid al-Haram. So this is these kind of towers have been historically used for people to call for the prayers in Islam, although not as commonly used now, or they would have speakers really nowadays. And then it shows also, for example, here, four schools of the Sunni Muslim, which was like you can consider as not denomination, but a school of thoughts in Islam, because in Islam there's a lot of diversity and understanding the scripture in many ways. And you can see here they're constructed in many ways around it as well. And then you can also see something called, this is like a well for water that's called Zamzam, which is considered as holy water as well. in Islam that has been actually very old. And then there's something called Maqam Ibrahim, which considered as the places where Ibrahim used it to build this Kaaba. And then, as I mentioned, the Zamzam well is featured as a domed structure here with a circle around it. It's a well for water. And then, on the other hand of this, it has a depiction of the Rawdah, which is similar to what we have seen before, but it's kind of developed in more schematic drawings, and it's a bit more detailed here. And for example, you can see here the burial place for or the tomb of Fatima, which is the daughter or the beloved daughter, and she was the youngest of his daughters. She was born almost next to the Prophet. And also in various copies, the Rawdah features additional elements, as you can see here, the minarets. They mentioned the kind of the towers, and then the garden of Fatima, or where her tomb is, and the surrounding. So I will show you a few of these examples I try to find later on, and you can see even some of them start from the 17th century, although this one in Tunisia. But most of them you can see here, and they start to be very colorful and very detailed. You can see the Kaaba here, and this is the Medina, the two cities, or the two holy cities in Islam. And you can see here the same one, and this is the Ottoman, like in Turkey. And this one is very detailed, and you can see the text here on the left as well, next to the drawings. And here's another one, and another one. And you can see they're starting to become very similar, although you can see, for example, in India, or copies from India are very, very different. And you can see that from the use of the colors and the structure. Here are a few more examples. And over time, they start even becoming more like in a 3D way of depiction, as you can see here. And this is one of the most well-preserved ones. And you can see how beautiful it is as well, with the golding surrounding as well. So actually, in this collection, like I think this would be the biggest collection so far I have found, or there isn't that has actually these illustrations over time as a timeline. So we probably try to have it online for further inspection if you want to look at these pictures closely with their sources as well. And many of these books or illustration I was able to obtain also in different libraries. For example, like many of them, at least 10 I found in the National Library of Israel, or in that region of Palestine area as well. And you can see here some from the 19th century as well. And this one is also one of the most beautiful one as well. And you can see it seems many of the illustrations from or the Indians manuscripts were having this surrounding that's unique to them as well here. And this one black and white, and you can see here the Kaaba over there, and then this is the Medina. And also there's something else, if you didn't notice, that because over time Saudi Arabia were expanding actually the mosque or the Kaaba surrounding, because it was very, very small, obviously, when Islam started 100 years ago. But then they have been actually expanding the mosque a lot to accommodate more people, as I mentioned. And this depiction also could be kind of an example of that, to show that expansion. So that could be also a way of how it's used as well. And this is another one, and here another one as well. So that brings us to kind of the end of this. So working on these 3 manuscripts, thanks to the Remnant Trust and ex-seminary to work with me as well during these hard times, trying times. But what we're trying to conclude here is, so these old manuscripts in Arabic, they come from several centuries ago. Some of them could be as far as 4 centuries. So they are used in different forms on daily basis by Muslims around the world. So we have seen from the Google Trends figures, they're used from Australia to the Middle East, Asia, and even the US. And some of the texts are self-memorized and recited in communal settings to celebrate certain Islamic events, as you have seen the one in a group in Chicago. And although you can see that it was, for example, Googled more in English, obviously, but many of these, or even the Quran in Muslims, even if they're not speaking Arabic, they will try to actually read it or recite in Arabic, because there's a lot of aspect into that in Islam, and the importance or the value of that to be read in Arabic, or even the necessity in sometimes. So even the poem of the mantle, it's translated, of course, for the understanding of what is it about and everything, but still it's recited in its original language, which is Arabic. And we have also seen from Dalai Khair's book that its artwork or the illustrations have been considered continuously evolving and have been updated over the years, and it will be interesting to see. I couldn't find any actually current versions of these books, or more like modern ones written in these days, or at least in this century, to see whether the authors will update it in a different way of its depiction, especially with the development of technology and drawing techniques as well. So that'll be interesting, something to look into in the future. So again, I would like to thank Mary and Alex for their help and their encouragement, and giving me the chance to work on these books and examine them. It was really an honor to do that, to examine them, because the Remnant Trust do a lot of fascinating work with their collection over the time, and have been always interested to work with them for a chance to try to contribute in any way, which I hope I did. So yeah, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. My email is Moamen Elmassry, MOAMEN.ELMASSRY @ttu.edu or @gmail.com. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward for your feedback and comments. Thank you. Questions. Bye.